We will get started in 1 minute. All right, all right, all right. We're live. So, your favorite therapist is back, Lily Dubie. Just have my Facebook. If you wanted to join my Facebook, Evaluate Consulting Services LLC. And from there, you could also book a 30-minute free consultation with our um, for counseling services or just consultation. The website is thevalueconsultingservices.com. All right. So as you can see by the title, we're going to get back to it. We're going to go down the rabbit hole today. So yesterday I talked some about the Community Health Act of 1963. I hope you were able to catch that live because if not, hopefully you won't be too lost today. But you can always go back and check that live, or you can start here and then go back and you know check the previous live about the Community Health Act, so you can just tie it all together. But the reason I'm starting here because, like I mentioned on my previous live yesterday, part one, I was looking for some other information, right? And then I just stumbled upon this. So it's kind of taking us back some, just so we can understand where we're at now. And before I get started, I also want to just say that I will be sharing material. I will let you know if it's from another author. I will share the author's name. And also on this page, we will talk all things mental health. So we just don't know what we might get into for today. So sometimes we will talk about specific um, types of therapy, right? Like earlier, we talked about the CBT therapy, even though my mic was acting up, but that's what that was about, and I will bring that back at a later date. And today we're just going on part two of the Community Health Act. So whatever it is that I find, and I feel that that it would be good to share, I will bring that. So we talk all things mental health, and we're going to talk about it, and we're going to stop this stigmatization of it, right? And we're going to get the word out. We're going to get the word out. We are praying people here. I pray every single day. I use my scriptures. Okay, so let me say that first. Second, I want to say, like I have used this example before, if you broke your leg or something, right? That's your physical body. You will be praying on the way to the hospital. So you still gonna go get some help for your leg, right? Because you cannot fix a broken leg. It's by yourself. So, but you're gonna be praying on the way to the hospital to give these doctors strength, right? To the wisdom and the courage to treat you. So that's kind of how mental health works too. You still gonna be praying throughout the whole situation, but it's just another part of your support system. So that's where the mental health aspect of everything comes in at. So it's not replacing your spirituality or anything like that. It's just another part of therapy. Is just another part of your support system. So okay, so now that we have that out, um, let's get started. I have a great show for you today. I hope. you enjoy this as much as I enjoyed putting it together and doing the research for it. So we might be all over the place a little bit, but hopefully by the end you'll be able to tie everything back in together. So the Community Health Act of 1963, we're going to actually uh, read that health act. Well, go into some of it. We might not read all of it, but we will definitely be looking at the original artifacts from that health act. So we're going to do that. We're going to see what actually happened after this health act was passed, even though so far, this is my opinion. I feel that it was done in good faith from JFK, and mainly because, he had a sister that was dealing with mental health issues, which is Rosemary Kennedy. You can Google her if you want to know more information about her. And I also will talk a little bit about her today. But so I think, well, I feel that when this um, when this act was signed into law, it was done as a good faith effort, and the whoever was in charge at the time just didn't have all the information that was needed to ensure that this would be, that this would be turn out to be good for all. So we'll go into all of that. The people that are incarcerated because of mental health issues. We'll go into a lot of things. So I have a lot to bring you. But before we get into JFK's, talking more about the Community Health Act, I just want to take you back to, I was reading this article, and let's see, let me share it. Hold on. Give me a second. Let me go back. Okay. Okay. Give me a second. Let me see. Let me share my screen. Um, okay. So I did find this interesting article, right? So this article is basically about a quest for a cure. So it's basically talking about a quest for a cure, care and treatment in Missouri's first state mental hospital. So even though it's talking about Missouri's first state mental hospital, it will still give us kind of a outlook of how mental health looked back then, starting with 1840. So we're gonna go into this, and then this will lead us up to the Community Health Act of 1963. Okay, and I thought it was so interesting. I just love this type of stuff. But okay, so let's get started. So it says 1840, a revolution in treatment. So it says Frenchman Philippe Pinel argued in the late 18th century that confining the mentally ill to jails, pens, cellars, and garrets, restraining them in chains, straitjackets, and chairs, feeding them bread and water, and hiring attendants based on their strength and not their compassion or medical training was just simply unacceptable. Sparking a revolution in the treatment of the mentally ill, Pinnell's ideas were discussed by Missouri legislators in 1845. Nevertheless, the state continued to use the letting out system, whereby countries placed their mentally ill in the care of the lowest bidder. In 1849, so this would have been about 4 years later, the chairman of the House Committee on a Lunatic Asylum described this practice as one virtually guaranteed to foster coercion and to provide patients the same type of care given to wild animals. Okay, so that was 1840. All right, so we're moving on up. This is about 11 years later. So we had 11 years. Let's see what we came up with in 1851. It says a place for a cure. Until 1853, Dr. Turner R. H. Smith, the first superintendent, was the only physician on staff responsible for the medical, moral, and physical treatment of each inmate. So that means he had to take care of all the medical issues, keep a moral and physical treatment. Okay, so that was up until 1853. Smith, who relied on his attendants to help cure his patients, immediately established a cardinal rule of behavior. Violent hands shall never be laid on a patient under any provocation. Any personnel who could not adopt this sentiment were unfit to treat this insane, and any who violated this principle were not wanted here. So this is a cool picture right here. It says patients of the asylum out for a walk. So I cannot really see them, but there's that. So that's 1851. So now we're going to, this is about 19 years later. Okay, so this is 1870, about 19 years later. Okay, so it says long term care. Former Superintendent Smith rejected the ready use of restraints and the wholesale employment of drugs as medical treatment. Superintendent Hughes, though, defended the application of restraining devices, especially among female patients, and the widespread use of alcoholic beverages and opium. I would part with any other remedy, he argued, before I would give up opium. Wow, how we have came a long way. Could you imagine a doctor prescribing opium these days? Okay, so this is 1870. Hughes also advocated the infliction of pain through scarification, blisters, and emetics to rouse the system and divert the patients from their delusions. In 1872, Hughes was forced to resign, but not because of his treatment philosophy, but due to apparent financial mismanagement. Okay. So now this is 30 years later. Let's see where we're at. It says emerging treatment. So, okay, we're moving on up. The old time political doctors practically disappeared from these institutions. Among medical innovations may be mentioned the employment of women physicians, trained nurses, resident or part-time dentists, the installation of X-ray plants and laboratory equipment, uniform system of examination and history writing, the introduction of occupational therapy, the elimination of seclusion and restraint, except in patients who mutilate their persons. So basically, they're saying that before, I'm assuming before 1900s, they will eliminate the patients, but now this is no longer. So now, unless they are have history of self harm, mutilated person have evidence of self harm. An addition of consulting staffs to the hospital. So this is what's going on. 1923. So they're moving away more. They're moving away from the old time political doctor, and then they are now hiring more medical innovations and employment of the above, which are what I just mentioned. And so this is just a interesting picture. As you can see, says rocking chair therapy on a female ward. So this was for their therapy. This was 1913. And they're using rocking chair therapy on a female ward. Okay, so that's 1900. All right, so let's go to 1900 to 1960. So this is tuberculosis. It started to become a huge issue in this this time. And tuberculosis, I do a lot of like what would it be called? Research. I just love history. So I have uh, seen tuberculosis also referred to as dysentery. So if you're looking up old articles and you see dysentery, that's also tuberculosis. All right. So it says, in addition to mental illness, the hospital had to treat the physical health of its residents. Tuberculosis presented a unique challenge to the staff and also the budget and physical plan. So in 1904, the disease accounted for nearly 25% of all patient deaths. That's a huge number. In 1905, the General Assembly appropriated $35,000 to construct a tubercular unit to quarantine and treat patients. It was named for Governor Herbert S. Hadley. So if you can see down here, you will see the sun parlor of the tubercular hospital in 1915. All right. So now we're going to go into a little spiritual health. This was 1956. A superintendent, Alfred K. Beyer, established a chaplaincy program at the hospital. It was determined to treat spiritual as well as physical and mental needs. So, okay, so this program was in charge of taking care of your spiritual needs, physical needs, and also mental needs. All right, so it says Bayer hired Reverend Dr. William Rogers as the hospital's first full time chaplain in 1956. Rogers conducted chapel in each building and offered spiritual counseling. He also laid the foundation for today's clinical pastoral education program, wherein religion students serve 12-month internships not to evangelize, but to learn to approach patients as humans. With rising patient diversity, today's program is challenged to work with many faiths. So this is just a stained glass window from the chapel or the bed center for the criminally insane. Okay, so now we're going to 1900 to 1980. So it says medical therapy alone could not foster recovery. A guiding strategy of the hospital was to combine medical treatment with amusement, exercise, and physical labor. Activities designed to relieve the monotony of life on the wards included walking in the gardens, playing croquet, reading, watching films, performing in musicals and dramas, and playing baseball, cards, or billiards. Patients and staff also participated in the hospital's annual carnival with its rides, games, and live entertainment. So these are just some patients at the Fulton State Hospital at a Halloween party. And of course, their faces have been altered. Okay. So next we're going to go to, this is from 1900 to 1960, Life on the Ward. The optimistic cure rate of 90% anticipated in 1845 never materialized. In 1900, less than 20% were discharged as recovered or improved. That number fell to about 14% in 1930. Patients spent the greater part of their lives in the wards amidst overcrowded conditions. They sat quietly in rocking chairs all day with only their thoughts for company because attendance discouraged conversation and noise. After World War II, though, public interest in mental health issues grew. That was reflected at Fulton as the hospital attempted to provide more normal living conditions for the patients. So it says, when you are in a place like this for years on end, you seem to be lost to all the world You grow to feel that you belong to the place and everyone here belongs to you. In place of the loved ones who no longer seem to care, you learn to feel a kinship and sympathy with all the lonely shadows among whom you move. All right. So that's that. And they have from 1960 to 1980, Life on Awards. When Dr. Donald Peterson began his 14-year tenure as superintendent, or as he said, CEO, in 1962, more than 2,200 people called the hospital home. Conditions were dreary, staff struggled to maintain minimum care, and the hospital was in danger of losing federal accreditation. But because Dr. Peterson and his wife were involved in the local community, volunteer efforts for the patients grew to include music therapy, chapel meetings, birthday, and other evening parties. Peterson preferred that patients not be idle during their stay and was hopeful that each generation of new drugs would enable patients to become truly well. So we're in 1962 now, and this is the TV room in the 70s. Let me see, can I make it bigger? Oh, so here we go. So this is the TV room in the 70s at the hospital. Okay, so let me go back. All right, so let me see the Life on the Ward. They decorated for Christmas. All right, so let's go back to where we were at. So now we're going to go back to the 1930s to the 1950s. Okay, so it says new treatments. The use of certain treatments for mental illness changed with every medical event. Although hydrotherapy, metrazole convulsion, and insulin shock therapy were popular in the 1930s, these methods gave way to psychotherapy in the 1940s. And by the 1950s, doctors favored artificial fever therapy and electroshock therapy. So this is going to be a patient describing the process of electric shock in 1957. So patients were generally on electrical shock treatment twice a week, 2 days for the women, which was Mondays and Thursdays, and 2 days for the men, Tuesdays and Fridays. Promptly at 7:30, treatment patients were running up the cry. Treatment patients, get to the door. Begging, pleading, crying, and resisting, they were herded into the gymnasium and seated around the edge of the room. Between them and the shock treatment table was a long row of screens. The table on the other side of the screen held as much terror for most of these patients as the electric chair in the penitentiaries did for criminals. In order to save time, one or more patients were called behind the screen to sit down and take off their shoes, while the patient who had just preceded them was still on the table going through the convulsions that shake the body after the electric shock has knocked them unconscious. One attendant standing at the head of the table to put the rubber heel in their mouth so they won't chew their tongue during the convulsive stage. On either side of the table stand three other attendants to hold them down. The only comforting thing from those times was the sight of some of the quieter and more controlled patients comforting the terror stricken ones. I can remember many a friendly hand placed on mine, many a comforting shoulder I leaned against while I waited my turn. Has changed somehow now, I am glad to say, and treatments are not quite so inhumanely administered. But I hope to see the day when they will be entirely replaced by the new drugs now coming into use as tranquilizers. And then we had the hydrotherapy Exposing patients to baths or showers of warm water for a extended period of time often have had a calming effect on them. For this reason, mental hospitals use hydrotherapy as a tool for treating mental illness. And this was 1910. You can see um, the patients. They're in the steam cabinet. All right. So let's go. So now we're at 1950 to the present. Drug therapy. Before Thorazine, all you could do was restrain violent patients. People would be in restraints for years. In violent episodes, patients and aides both got hurt. And this is coming from a state hospital staff member. The introduction of Thorazine, the first psychotropic drug, was a milestone in treatment therapy, making it possible to calm unruly behavior, anxiety, agitation, and confusion without using physical restraints. It often it offered peace for patients and safety for staff. Although this chemical restraint appeared more humane for patients, it was not without adverse side effects. One hospital aide accidentally experienced Thorazine when he drank fruit punch mix for the patients. I was just getting all stiff. I felt so bad. However, each new generation of drugs and research holds promise that more and more of the mentally ill can be treated as outpatients. And this is just a picture of the pharmacy. So this is just a picture of the pharmacy, 1960. So this is 1947, occupational therapy. After World War II, the emerging field of occupational therapy offered patients an opportunity to be useful in society. To take advantage of this new approach, the hospital constructed a separate OT building in 1948 with a library, carpentry shop, and studios for poetry, basket making, and weaving. It later incorporated leather working, ceramics, and other handicrafts. The hospital annual report to the legislature, me and pronouncing these words, I tell you, that year stated that these activities were directly, specifically at improving mental conditions by treating external interests and rebuilding self confidence. Hey, that was a great concept, I would say. By the 1970s, additional activities offered to patients included music therapy, recreational therapy, and industrial therapy. So this is just a picture of the hospital patients at work on craft and art projects. Okay, so this is going to be surgical treatment. I thought I could eat my cookie, but I don't know. Maybe you can hear it. Okay, 1930 to 1966, surgical treatment. In the 1930s, Portuguese neurologist Edgar Munez pioneered the lobotomy, a procedure in which the brain's frontal lobe nerves are severed by inserting tools through the eye socket. Ooh. Widely accepted as a treatment for mental illness through the 1950s, the process attempted to control various behaviors by altering the section of the brain affecting social conduct. At 14, the philosophy of treating mental illness aggressively sometimes meant lobotomy. An elaborate system of checks included including interviews with social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, and the patient, ensured that the irreversible operation was absolutely essential. The hospital performed its last lobotomy in 1966. Psychiatric drugs made the method obsolete. So how many, I don't know how many have caught my the part one of this from yesterday when I was talking about JFK's sister, Rosemary. She did have one of these done. The only sad part about hers was it did not work on her. So it did make her permanently disabled. Basically, even though as time went on, as years went on, she did regain the ability to walk again, but not um, that it was more like with a limp. So, but she did not regain her mental capacities back because before, well, you just have to go catch the part one, and you could catch up on Rosemary Kennedy, and you would see that I also talked about how this was performed on her. So the last lobotomy was done in 1966, and at this time, more psychiatric drugs became more readily available. All right, so it says 1988 social learning program. Until 1988, no systematic method governed assignment of patients to wards in a bed center. The result was a mixture of patients with varying mental and personality disorders and treatment needs. Staff, frustrated by the inability to gain consistent routines and orderly patient interaction, organized a committee to assess the problem. This resulted in the Social Learning Program, SLP. This was a treatment plan rewarding good behavior. Patient socialization progress is evaluated by trained staff who record and analyze group and personal interactions. The successful adoption of SLP to a forensic facility has drawn national attention to the BIS unit. Charts like these are used to track patients' behavior and progress in the social learning program. And patients collect tokens for good behavior. So this is basically, and I can tell you that a method of this is still used to this day. Maybe it's a little more advanced, of course, but a method of this is still used. So this is just the social skills. They're rewarded for having great social skills. All right, so this is the youth program. So it's 1957. And just keep in mind, I just want to, because I'm going through this to set us up for the Community Health Act of 1963. So I just want you to pay close attention to the dates as we go down this timeline, and in relativity to when the Community Health Act was signed in 1963. Okay, so it says 1957 youth programs. Amidst reports of rising juvenile delinquency, the Fulton State Hospital decided in 1956 to accept emotionally disturbed youth. The children's ward opened the following year with a quota of 20 patients. By 1964, juvenile patients numbered over 200. In 1968, $3.8 million was appropriated for a six-building complex. Dedicated in 1971, the Hearns Child and Youth Center provided the state's first such youth facility. It was equipped with residential schools, the gym, recreational center, outpatient clinic, and also special amenities such as a television studio, And also, the center advocated individualized programs designed for specific emotional, social, physical, and special educational needs. So, I'm pretty sure that would more than likely became the blueprint for other programs, similar programs, but I would need to do more research to actually confirm that. So, this is pre adolescent boys at the Center Emotionally Disturbed Boys, 1959. Okay, so now we're moving to 1980, outpatient treatment. One of the most common reasons a person returns to the hospital after going out on a trial visit or being discharged is that he stops taking his medication. So this was just a manual for patients and their families from 1970. Many with mental illness forget skills learned in a hospital setting after discharge. Outpatient care, though, could have offset this dilemma by assisting released patients and reducing the need for readmission. Under new mental health laws in the 1950s, the Fulton Hospital initiated a modified system of outpatient care. In the 60s, the hospital established community clinics in Mexico, Hannibal, Rolla, Lebanon, and Eldon. It was just all over the place. By 1970, a typical treatment for mental illness included a brief stay at the hospital for stabilization. Upon release, the patient received in-home visits from the trained staff who assisted with medication schedules. So this is just a picture of the outpatient clinic. They will go in, so they'll be released from the hospital after stabilization, and then they just go to the outpatient clinic and receive their medication. All right. Okay, so that brings us here. The hope for the future. 19th century caretakers dreamed of a time when all mental illness, developmental disabilities, and addictions could be cured or prevented. As the Fulton State Hospital enters the 21st century, medications and treatments enable mentally ill people to live and be successfully treated in a local community rather than being indefinitely institutionalized. The hospital's teams of doctors, social workers, nurses, aides, and chaplains have drawn the world's attention for their innovative patient programs. Additionally, increased legislative funding allows the hospital to address the alcohol, drug, and gambling addictions. In 1974, the Department of Mental Health was organized with three ongoing missions. First, prevent mental disorders, developmental disabilities, and substance abuse. Second, to treat, rehabilitate, and rehabilitate Missourians who suffer from those conditions. And third, to improve public understanding and attitudes about mental disorders, disabilities, and substance abuse. And of course, this mission continues to today. All right, well, let me come back. So, what do you all think about that? That was a lot of information, right? That was a lot of information. Because even though it was for Missouri, that was just an outlook on probably how most state hospitals, I would say, generally was operating then, right? Because that was the resources we had for back then. Okay, so now, give me a second. Let me share my screen. So now, I don't know. Okay, here we go. Okay. So now what we're gonna do, we're gonna go into, this was a special message on mental illness and mental retardation. And before I go any further, I just wanna let everyone know that the word mental retardation is no longer appropriate. But this is the title of it, so that's why I'm just reading what the title says. But just keep in mind, mental retardation is no longer appropriate to use in these days and times. So this is special message on mental illness and mental retardation, February the 5th, 1963. So let's just set it up so we'll know what we're reading. This folder contains materials collected by the Office of President John F. Kennedy's Secretary, Evelyn Lincoln, concerning legislative activities and efforts to enact the Kennedy administration's legislative program. Items include releases of President Kennedy's special message to Congress on illness and mental retardation delivered from the White House fish room. In his speech, the president discusses his plans for national mental health program legislation, which proposes comprehensive community mental health centers. Keep in mind, it's 1963. Improve care in state mental health institutions, and increase research. To combat mental retardation, he recommends emphasizing preventative lifestyle measures, improve community services, increase research, and comprehensive maternity and child health care assistance program. All right, so let's get into it. Let's see what it says. All right, I'm just gonna download this because it's very hard to see. Let me see. I think it's right here. Give me a second. Just trying to. I can see it from here, but it's so small. So if I download it, that would be better. Okay, here we go. Let me make it big. Let me come back and share my screen. Give me a second. What is going on? Let's put it up. Put this up here. Let's see. Okay, so hopefully you all can see this. So this is February the 5th, 1963. This is page one. This is from the Office of the White House Press Secretary. So it says there should be no premature release of this message. Of course, it's been years and years ago, so it's definitely not a premature release. So this is from the White House, special message on mental illness and mental retardation. To the Congress of the United States, it is my intention to send shortly to the Congress a message pertaining to this nation's most urgent need in the area of health improvement. But two health problems, because they are of such critical size and tragic impact, and because their susceptibility to public action is so much greater than the attention they have received, are deserving of a wholly new national approach and a separate message to the Congress. These twin problems are mental illness and mental retardation. And just keep in mind, I hate saying that word mental retardation because, like I said, that word is no longer used in the field, right? But like I said, this is from 1963. And I think when I come across that word, I just might say etc. because it's considered offensive these days, right? But this is 1963, so we just have to keep that in mind as I'm reading this. All right, so it says from the earliest days of the public health, from the earliest days of the Public Health Service to the latest research of the National Institute of Health, the federal government has recognized its responsibilities to assist, stimulate, and channel public. Hold on, give me a second. Give me a second. Okay, so I'm back. I was gonna read the whole Community Health Act, but I found something that's even better. So I did find a video of it. So just pay attention and just see let me know what you think about it once the video is over. So just give me a second. Let me share my screen, and this is the actual video from the Community Health Act. Well, when he addressed it in 1963. No, this. Hold on, I'll be right back. This is not what I was. Okay, I think I found the video I was looking for. So let me share the screen and we'll discuss it after it's over. Let's see. Hopefully, I can play this without any type of issues. Of course, this is not my video. I'm showing this video for research, educational purposes only. I do not own the copyright rights to this video. I do not own the copyrights to this video. I'm sharing for educational purposes only and research purposes. So I do not own the rights to this video. All right, so let's get started. Hold on.
I have
I
sent
sent
to
to
Congress
Congress
today
today
a
a
series of
series of
proposals
proposals
to help
to
fight
help fight
mental
mental
illness
illness
and mental
and mental
retardation.
retardation.
These two
These two
afflictions have
afflictions
been
have been
long
long
neglected.
neglected.
They
They
occur
occur
more
more
frequently,
frequently,
affect more
affect more
people,
people,
require
require
more
more
prolonged
prolonged,
treatment, caused more individual and family suffering than any other condition in American life. It has been tolerated too long. It has troubled our national conscience, but only as a problem unpleasant to mention, easy to postpone, and despairing of solution. The time has come for a great national effort. New medical, scientific, and social tools and insights are now available. With respect to mental illness, our chief aim is to get people out of state custodial institutions and back into their communities and homes without hardship or danger. Today, nearly one-fifth of the 279 state mental institutions are fire and health hazards. Three-fourths of them were opened before World War II. Nearly half of the 530,000 persons in our state mental hospitals are in institutions with over 3,000 patients, getting little or no individual treatment. Many of these institutions have less than half of the professional staff required. 45% of them have been hospitalized for 10 years or more. If we launch a broad new mental health program now, it will be possible within a decade or two to reduce the number of patients now under custodial care by 50% or more. Mental retardation ranks with mental health as a major health, social, and economic problem in this country. It strikes our most precious asset, our children. It disables 10 times as many people as diabetes, 20 times as many as tuberculosis, and 600 times as many as infantile paralysis. There are between 5 and 6 million mentally retarded children and adults, an estimated 3% of our population, much too high for a country of our resources and wealth. There are many causes, many of them still unknown, but I think that statistics already point to a direct relationship between lack of prenatal care and mental retardation. Primarily for lack of funds, between 20 and 60% of the mothers receiving care in public hospitals in some large cities receive inadequate or no prenatal care, and mental retardation is more prevalent in these areas. I am recommending a new 5-year program of assistance to states and local health departments to develop comprehensive maternity and child health care programs, serving primarily families who are otherwise unable to pay for needed medical care. We as a nation have neglected too long the mentally ill and the mentally retarded. It affects all of us, and it affects us as a country. I am hopeful that beginning today, this country will move with a great national effort in this field so vital to the welfare of our citizens.
I've never had before.
Okay. So what did y'all think about the video? What do you, looking back, so what do you think about it? Just like looking back. I mean, it sounds like it could have been possibly a good idea. And I think it still was, but I don't think it was thought through, my opinion. So before I go any further, while we're on the subject of JFK and the Community Health Act of 1963, I want to read you some more about his sister. Oh, hold on. I don't think I'm sharing my screen. Hold on. Hold on. Let me share my screen. Um, I have all these tabs put up. There we go. Okay. So, Okay, so now we will talk about a little bit about Rosemary Kennedy and supposedly why the Community Health Act of 1963 was passed in the first place. So this is coming from jfklibrary.org. This is where I received this information from. So this is Rosemary Kennedy. And if you had the opportunity to look at my last live, well, not the last one, but the one about the JFK. JFK is called Community Mental Health Care Act of 1963. I also mentioned his sister there, but we're just gonna do a more thorough um, look at her. So Rosemary Kennedy was born Rose Marie Kennedy on September the 13th, 1918. She was the third child and eldest daughter of Joseph and Rose Kennedy. She was slower to crawl, slower to walk, and to speak than her brothers, and she experienced learning difficulties when she reached school age. Despite her apparent and intellectual disabilities, Rosemary participated in most family activities. Let me just make sure my mic is on. I don't want to make that mistake again. All right. So it says she participated in most family activities. In a diary she kept as a teenager, she described people she met, dances and concerts she attended, and a visit to the Roosevelt White House. When her father was appointed U.S. Ambassador to Britain in 1938, Rosemary went to live in London and was presented at court along with her mother and sister Kathleen. But when the family returned to the United States in 1940, Rosemary was not making progress, but seemed instead to be going backwards. As her sister Eunice later wrote, at 22, she was becoming increasingly irritable and difficult. The following year, after being persuaded that a lobotomy would help to calm his daughter and prevent her sometimes violent mood swings, Joseph Kennedy authorized the operation. And if you were listening earlier, we explained, we went into detail about what a lobotomy is. It goes to your eye socket. It sounds very intense. So the relatively new procedure, which at times seemed to hold great promise, left Rosemary permanently incapacitated um, and unable to care for herself. On the recommendation of Archbishop Cushing, Rosemary was sent to St. Colita School for Exceptional Children in Jefferson, Wisconsin, where she would live for the rest of her life. Eunice Kennedy Shriver had a particularly close relationship with her older sister and great empathy for Rosemary and others who faced similar challenges. In 1962, Mrs. Shriver started a summer day camp in her own backyard for children and adults with intellectual disabilities. A camp which involved into Special Olympics, now a global competition that involves 1.4 million athletes from 150 countries. Rosemary Kennedy died on January 5th, 2005 at 86. She had a long life. Eunice Shriver said in her eulogy that Rosemary had left a legacy that was long and deep. So, along with inspiring Mrs. Shriver's own work with the Special Olympics, Rosemary had inspired her brother, President John F. Kennedy, to initiate sweeping legislation designed to improve the quality of life for Americans with disabilities. She has inspired her sister Jean Kennedy Smith to start very special arts and her nephew Anthony Shriver to start Best Buddies. Hospitals, schools, and other facilities around the world have been named in honor of Rosemary Kennedy. So let me just read that line one more time. Rosemary has inspired her brother, President John F. Kennedy, to initiate sweeping legislation designed to improve the quality for Americans with disabilities. All right. So, and then also you would need to go check my live from yesterday, part one. So that will go more into detail as well as some of the implications that came from this bill. Okay, so we got that out the way. We got that. Let me see. Give me a second. I'm trying to find. We did that. We're finishing up here. All right. So that's what I want to share. Okay. All right. All right. So let me share my screen. I'm bringing it home. I'm bringing it home. Let me share the screen. Okay. All right. Here we go. So it says that the emptying of mental hospitals contribute to homelessness. This is by Jessica Classic, written 2016. It's on KQED. Okay, so this is the Mented Men's Building at Atnos State Hospital. Okay, after patients were released from mental hospitals, there was, because keep in mind the Community Health Act of 1963, this is exactly what it did, right? It released patients basically from mental hospitals, but in the hopes of giving them a full life. But as we, in 2022, it's safe to say that we have enough information gathered now to know that even though some, a lot of people dealing with maybe some some types of mental health issues. We don't even say mental illness no more. Mental health issues. They will be able to be independent, live, as a high quality of life. But we have to be honest with ourselves and just realize that it's gonna be some individuals dealing with severe mental health issues that won't ever be able to be by themselves. And those were a lot of the people that were in these hospitals that were released out there. This act was signed, right? So even though and you'll have to go check out part one because I went in full detail about this on part one. So even though it probably sounded like it was a great idea because they were being released from these hospitals where they were faced with the same monotony every day and wasn't really able to see their family members, so it was basically like it was just in the hospital. But when they were released in the community, they basically had no one to ensure that they were taking their medications on a timely manner, to ensure that they were just being taken care of as a whole, as if as opposed to when they were in the hospital and it was their job to do that. So, so a lot of these people so they went from the hospital, maybe went into group homes, but a lot of times they would stop taking their medication. So these people, no one would want to be around them, and they were, however it went, either they left the group homes or they were forced to leave. So either way it went, the end result was homelessness, right? Because the hospitals were no longer available, and a lot of times the families were long gone. They just didn't have anybody else. They didn't have a choice but to be homeless because they were either kicked out of the group homes, um, for not, because no one is on them anymore to take this medication, so they're not no longer on their medications, or they left. But anyway, let's get into this. So it says after patients were released from mental hospitals, there wasn't always a place for them to go. On this week's episode, we'll explore is the institutionalization, what's affecting the Bay Area's homeless crisis. which we talked about that yesterday as well, right? We were talking about the deinstitutionalization. Um, so that was one topic, and this is from their podcast here at KQED. I said it was one question that kept coming up. Is the situation as bad as it is because of the closure of mental health facilities in our state? So let's just get started. So we're going to just go through a quick timeline. This deinstitutionalization, a history. So in 1833, Rochester State Hospital opens in Massachusetts as the first mental hospital fully supported by state funds. 1833. 1860, 28 of the 33 existing U.S. states have state psychiatric hospitals. So 28 of the 33. It was only 5 states that did not have care for at the state level in 1860. So this is 1939 to 1945. During World War II, conscientious objectors interstate psychiatric hospitals to replace doctors who were sent away for the war effort. Okay, so this when the doctors started to become uh, replaced at the hospitals. 1946, Life magazine publishes photos depicting the horrors inside the hospital. 1954, chlorpromazine, marketed as Thorazine, is approved by the Food and Drug Administration. It's the first antipsychotic drug widely used to treat the symptoms of mental illness. For many, it brought hope that some patients could live alone among the community. So this is 1954. So I guess that's what that drug was. So I guess we have to go back to 1954. This is a new drug, first antipsychotic drug. So this at first they really had nothing but to have the patients in the hospital, right? No type of medication or anything, except for the lobotomies, of course. And how many people are actually going through with that? And I'm pretty sure it was probably so very expensive to have a lobotomy back then as well. So Thorazine was the first drug. So I can pretty much guarantee that they were very optimistic that this was going to be the cure all. Everyone would be okay. Everyone would be able to live together, and it's happily ever after, right? All right. So let me see. Can I? I can't see this picture. So this is just pictures of the hospital. I can't read the writing. It's called Bethlehem, 1946. If you just want to Google that and go more into it. So it says 1955. The number of patients inside public mental hospitals nationwide peaked at 560,000. 1959. The number of patients in California state mental hospitals peaked at 37,000. 1963. President John F. Kennedy signs the Community Mental Health Act, which we have been talking a lot about. Let me see. I was trying to see. I clicked on there hoping I could see it, but no. Oh, where am I? Oops, sorry. I didn't even know you could see that. Let me see if I'm back. I'm back. Okay. All right. So it says 19. Um. Okay. So it says 1963. President John F. Kennedy signs the Community Mental Health Act, which we have been talking a lot about. This pushes the responsibility of mentally ill patients from the state towards the federal government. JFK wanted to create a network of community mental health centers where mentally ill people could live in a community while receiving care. JFK could have been inspired to act because his younger sister, Rosemary, was mentally disabled, received a lobotomy, and spent her life hidden away. Which we know that that is exactly what happened because we read that on the library. Well, allegedly, but more than likely, allegedly, that was why he was inspired to sign this act because of his sister. Okay, so it says less than a month after signing the new legislation, JFK is assassinated. The community mental health centers never received stable funding, and even 15 years later, less than half the promised centers are built. So, oh, okay, so now it makes sense. So he did have every intention of, making this be better for the people dealing with mental health issues, but the problem was he was assassinated 3 weeks later, so it was never able to come in full fruition because allegedly Ronald Reagan, no, I'm sorry, it was Jimmy Carter came into office, and then Jimmy Carter, and then it was Ronald Reagan. And I know Ronald Reagan, he struck down a it wasn't the same one. I'm gonna have to do some more research, but I know it's something about this act that Ronald Reagan also played a part in. But it'll probably be the part three. It's a lot. All right. So it says less than a month after signing the new legislation, JFK was assassinated, and the promise centers, less than half, have been built. Okay, 1965. The U.S. Congress establishes Medicaid and Medicare. Mentally disabled people living in a community are eligible for benefits, but those in psychiatric hospitals are excluded. By encouraging patients to be discharged, state legislators could shift the cost of care for mentally ill patients to the federal government. Ew, okay. Did y'all get that? So basically, if you were still in the hospital at this time, because keep in mind, in the 50s, they started releasing people. If you've been paying attention from my first life until now, in the 50s, they did start releasing the people from the hospitals. So now, and then JFK passed this act in 1963, and now here we are in 1965 when Medicare and Medicare were first introduced. But they're telling people in order to take part in this, you cannot be in a psychiatric hospital. So basically, that was incentive, right, to basically leave the hospital so that you could be able to afford your care. Really? Okay, so 1967, Ronald Reagan is elected governor. Okay, so here we are right here. Ronald Reagan is elected governor of California. At this point, the number of patients in state hospitals had fallen to 22,000. And the Reagan administration uses the decline as a reason to make cuts to the Department of Mental Hygiene. They cut 2,600 jobs and 10% of the budget, despite reports showing that hospitals were already below recommended staffing levels. So Ronald Reagan did that as governor of California, and he was still voted in for president. So 1967. Reagan signs the Lanterman-Petrie Short Act and ends the practice of institutionalizing patients against their will or for indefinite amounts of time. This law is regarded by some as a patient's Bill of Rights. Sadly, the care outside state hospitals was inadequate. The years after the law goes into effect, a study shows the number of mentally ill people entering the San Mateo criminal justice system doubles. Because if you remember my content from yesterday, and I was stating how the jail system is one of the main mental health providers in the world, especially here in the United States. It's one of the main because you got to think about it. That's if you have some type of mental health issues, that the prison system, the state jail system, they're required by law to provide you medications, to provide you what you need to deal with that diagnosis. So they're one of the main providers. Okay, so we got 1967. 1969, Reagan reverses earlier budget cuts. He increases spending on the Department of Mental Hygiene by a record of 28 million. Wow. Okay, so 1967, he cut it down. 2 years later, he must have got a lot of backlash from that. So 2 years later, he increased it by 28 million. 1973, the number of patients in California state mental hospitals fall to 7,000. 1980, President Jimmy Carter signs the Mental Health Systems Act to improve on Kennedy Street. So this is going to be part three for sure. We're going to go into Jimmy Carter's part. Okay, so Jimmy Carter signs it, and he's just basically trying to take JFK's dream further. So 1981, President Reagan became president somewhere around here, and he repealed Carter's legislation with the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act. This pushes the responsibility of mental ill patients back to the states. The legislation creates block grants for the states, but federal spending on mental illness declines. Now, in 2004, the U.S. Department of Justice estimates that 10% of state prisoners have symptoms that meet criteria for psychotic disorder. Let's see, 2015, in a San Francisco homeless count, 55% of people experiencing chronic homelessness report they have emotional or psychiatric conditions. 55%. Okay, so all right, so that's what that was. So 55% of the homelessness people in San Francisco, and I'm pretty sure that number probably is across the board, but we for sure have evidence that and this was 2015. I mean 2015. So I'm pretty sure that this number has risen. 55% of those that have chronic homelessness have emotional or psychiatric conditions. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it, you all. Okay, let me stop sharing this one. Let me stop sharing. And I think I got one more thing that I want to bring. And then we'll be done so I can let you all just think about all this information that was brought to you today. All right. So I just want to do a quick fact sheet, right? Let me see. I'm going to do a fact sheet. I'm just trying to bring this all together now. Let me share my screen. Okay, so we're just gonna look at this fact sheet. Okay, so oops, I did not mean to stop sharing. Okay, so this is not my writing, as you can see. This is from the Well Cornell Medicine and Psychiatry. It was compiled by Megan J. Wolf, PhD, MPH, on May 30th, 2017. So this is just a fact sheet about incarceration and mental health. It says individuals with mental illness and substance use disorders are significantly overrepresented in American jails and prisons, a development that has attracted the concerned clinicians, such as myself, researchers, policymakers, and corrections personnel. The rate of mental disorders in an incarcerated population is 3 to 12 times higher than that of the general community. This is true across the full spectrum of diagnoses, including schizophrenia, anxiety disorders, mood disorders, and impulse control disorders. These rates have been increasing. Reports of large numbers of mentally ill persons in jails and prisons began appearing in the 1970s. These numbers accelerated dramatically in the 1990s and 2000s, a trend particularly evident in urban centers such as Chicago and New York City. In 1990, 1 in 15 prisoners at Cook County Jail had some form of mental illness. In 2015, the estimated prevalence was 1 in 3. In 2015, the estimated prevalence was 1 in 3. So that means out of every 3 people, at least one has some form of mental health issues. At Rikers Island in New York City, the average daily population dropped 12% from 2005 to 2012, but the prevalence of mental illness rose 32%. Okay. So, the high rate of serious mental illness include major depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and other psychotic disorders, and incarceration settings have been a subject of particular alarm. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it, you guys. The rate of severe mental illness in jails and prisons is estimated to fall between 16% and 24%. So that means, just listen to this. Let me just repeat that again. The rate of severe, so we're not just talking about mild depression, some mild anxiety. We're saying severe mental illness in jails and prisons is expected to fall between 16% and 24%. First of all, why are they even in jail? That's a side of the spectrum I'm on. Why are they even in jail? Unless they have like a specialized unit to treat, these individuals. Um, and I'm not saying having them locked up behind any jail cells. Uh, by contrast, the rate of severe mental illness in the general community falls between 3.9 and 5.0. Okay, so just pay attention, stay with me. All right, so in jail, severe mental illness is estimated to fall between 16% and 24%, but just in the general community, it's 3.9 and 5.0. That is huge. Using the 16% estimate, there were at least 310,000 severely mental ill inmates in jails and prisons in 2000. So that's at least 310, so 113 per 100,000 population. In 2003, the number of individuals with severe mental illness in American prisons was 3 times higher than the number in psychiatric hospitals. So instead of taking them to the hospital, they closed out the hospitals and then they send them to the jails, allegedly. Allegedly. Um, Differences in data collection and reporting methods make it difficult to ascertain the rates of specific disorders. Nevertheless, an investigation of 28 studies on the prevalence of mental illness in prisons identified estimates in the following ranges. Current major depression from 9% to 29%. Current bipolar disorder from 5.5 to 16.1. And just keep in mind, I'm reading off these. This is the population of the jail system right now. Well, not right now, because it's probably higher than this. This article is kind of old. It's probably higher than this. Um, Current panic disorder from 1%, which would represent the women, to 5.5% for men and women, to 6.8% for men, and the rate in the general community was 0.5 to 3.0. Current schizophrenia from 2 to 6.5, and general community is zero point 0.5 to zero point 0.8. And ADHD from 10 to 25%. The rate in the general community was 4 to 5%. It says increased rates of mental illness and substance abuse and American incarceration settings draw from a series of factors. Okay, so the first one they're going to focus on is most people in the United States with serious mental illnesses, including substance abuse, do not receive treatment. So, a steady elimination of psychiatric hospital beds since 1955 have dramatically reduced the availability of inpatient services. So, if you've been following along through the part one of the Community Health Act, and then now we're on the part two, and we've been talking about how they started to close these psychiatric beds in the 50s. So they started to close them. So now the mentally, the ones with mental health issues, they had nowhere else to go but to jail, where they hopefully they could get started back on their medicine. So that was one of the reasons. I'm not going to go into the exact numbers. You can go replay the live and read the exact numbers if you would like. Um, It says community resources intended to replace inpatient care have not kept pace with the affected population, nor have they been adequately funded to do so. The Community Mental Health Centers Act of 1963, which established federal support for a new system of outpatient care, envisioned a system of supported community based resources anchored in health centers but did not receive needed political support or full appropriations. Because just keep in mind, 3 weeks later, I think it was 3 weeks later. Well, I think it was 3 weeks later, but I just want to say, I'll just say, very shortly after, JFK was assassinated. So, and that happened like it happened very very shortly after. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was like 3 weeks later. Um, So it says by 1975, there existed only 675 funded community mental health centers with 800 unfunded catchments remaining. Few community mental health centers successfully coordinated the aftercare services entitlements necessary for patients with severe and long-term mental illness. Services that were poorly coordinated or omitted altogether included psychiatric care, medication, education, and housing support, fuel assistance, aftercare services, foster care arrangements, and access to medications. So either so once they were released from the hospital, either these services went away, they just totally went away, or they were either poorly coordinated. And as you can see, that includes the medication and the psychiatric care, among other things. And it says failure to integrate these resources continue to impact patients even to this day. Federal spending on mental health initiatives have decreased dramatically since President Reagan's 1981 Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act, which shifted control back to the states in the form of block grants and reduced federal expenditures by 25%. In 2006, mental health spending by states was less than 12% of the $8 billion spent in 1955. So just keep in mind, so that's 1955. So previous to that, all the state hospitals were open. They was active. They was striving. So fast forward to 1955 and beyond, that's when they started to close these hospitals. So in 1955, they actually spent $8 billion, but in 2006, mental health spending by states was less than 12% of the $8 billion spent 1955. So it says cuts have continued on a state by state basis in the 21st century. Between 2009 and 2012, states cut nearly $4.5 billion in funding for services for the mentally ill, despite increases of nearly 10% in patient intake in the aftermath of the 2000 financial crisis. So I just hope that they're smarter this time because we have a similar, it's not a similar crisis, but we have a huge crisis that we never been through before going on right now. So I hope and I pray that we learn from our previous lessons and stop cutting the resources for mental health. It doesn't make any sense, in my opinion. Many reductions occurred through cuts to Medicaid, the largest source of funding for public mental health services for youth and adults. Taken together, the reductions represent the single largest decrease in mental health spending since the Vietnam era cuts of the late 60s. For many individuals, contact with the criminal justice system may represent the first occasion for any treatment services. Like I was saying earlier, prison cells are some of the only places in the United States where healthcare is guaranteed for law. And I just want to back up what I mean. I want to kind of explain more what I said earlier. I think I said earlier around the world, the only place that's guaranteed around the world, but I'm taking that back. I don't mean to say around the world. I'm going to say it is guaranteed by law in the United States. So treatment is guaranteed for mental health issues. It's guaranteed. Healthcare is guaranteed by law in the United States. Okay, so it says, thus, correctional facilities in the United States are widely held to be the largest provider of mental health services in the nation. 1966, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Estelle versus Gamble that failure to provide basic health care in correctional facilities violated the constitutional prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. The ruling mandated that prisons and jails provide services for medical care. So I don't know who needs to hear this, but just keep in mind if your loved one is in jail or prison, the system has to provide for them for as their health care. Um, so it says scholars note that the criminal justice system has become a system that cannot say no. Okay, so all right. So I know I've been on here for a while. I don't want to hold you all too much longer. Let me see. Let me just go through this and see if it's something else that screams out at me that I would want to share. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a part three of this. It just has to be because it's so much information to cover, right? So it's definitely will be a part three of the implications of the Community Health Act of 1963. It's so much valuable information. If nothing else, it shows us how to learn from our past, and if we know the past, we can try to stop from going the same direction in the future, right? So if nothing else, at least I hope that this brings awareness of where we have already been and where we need to go in the future. So, like I said, I don't really see anybody here right now, but as time goes on, everyone starts to hear about my page. I hope that we will start to have a conversation and be more involved in the content and things like that. So, like I said, on this page, we talk all things mental health. It's just no telling what conversation we might be on for the day. You won't know until you're here and actively taking part in the live. So I will see you all later. I might bring another live later on. I'm not sure, but I will definitely be back tomorrow. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to be talking about. I will be bringing a part three to this Community Health Act, and maybe just it might be a continuing series. I'm not sure, and I don't know when a part three will be coming, but it will come. So once again, it's your favorite therapist, Lily Duvet. Um, if, as you can see, this is my Facebook page. If you go on my Facebook page, you'll find more information about um, our company and what we do, what we provide, and things like that. But thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you the next time. Bye bye.